Today is the first day of real reckoning for the Epstein class.
This is a political exercise for Democrats and a few others, sadly, and it is as deceitful and dishonest as their pointless stunt to shut down the government.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Tuesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From President Trump hosting the Saudi Crown Prince at the White House to the House of Representatives voting to release the so-called Epstein files. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. The United Nations Security Council has approved President Trump's plan for Gaza's future. The resolution authorizes an international force to provide security in the war-torn territory and creates a transitional authority called the Board of Peace. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the plan, saying it will lead to peace through demilitarization. However, Hamas has rejected the blueprint as foreign control. The authorization expires at the end of 2027. The acting head of FEMA has resigned after just 6 months on the job. David Richardson faced heavy criticism for his handling of deadly Texas floods that killed at least 136 people in July. Lawmakers questioned why he didn't arrive on the ground until a week after the disaster. Richardson said he was camping with his sons when the floods hit and managed the response from his truck. His departure is the latest shakeup at FEMA, which has seen 18% of its permanent staff leave this year. And a federal judge is scolding the Justice Department for what he calls a disturbing pattern of profound investigative missteps in the case against former FBI Director James Comey. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick says prosecutors made fundamental misstatements to the grand jury that indicted Comey in September. Comey is charged with lying to Congress about authorizing FBI leaks to the media. And today we're learning more about what led to a cargo ship colliding with a 4-lane bridge in Baltimore, causing it to collapse. 6 construction workers on the Francis Scott Key Bridge died in that disaster last year. And now the National Transportation Safety Board is sharing results of its investigation. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra is following today's hearing and live in Washington for us. And Patrick, today's hearing will be about more than just this one bridge, won't it?
Absolutely, Holly. It's also about preventing a disaster like this from occurring at any other major bridge across the United States, specifically 68 bridges that are similar in age and design over waterways, very much like the Patapsco River in Baltimore. Some of these bridges, by the way, are very familiar to people. Golden Gate Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. But of course, first, the NTSB will be discussing the incident itself happening March of last year. 6 construction workers died when that ship hit the bridge. And we just learned from the NTSB that some of their initial findings right now are showing that those 6 construction workers actually could have had enough time to escape danger and to evacuate the bridge. Just over a minute they would have had to go about half a mile had there been better communication. So that's certainly going to be some really heartbreaking news for the families of those 6. But otherwise, really the focus is on 2 things, the ship and the bridge. Let's start with the ship. The NTSB saying that there were problems with the propulsion of the ship because there had been 2 power outages that occurred essentially at the worst possible time as the ship was trying to leave that port. And essentially right at the time it was transiting beneath that Francis Scott Key Bridge. So a huge focus on outdated electrical systems on board the ship, but also just the sheer massive size of the Dali, a ship that was far bigger than anything ever envisioned when the bridge itself was designed back in 1977. That takes us to the bridge. The NTSB saying that because it had been so old, it had not actually been updated and upgraded to 1991 standards that were designed to help bridges withstand impacts from ships, something the NTSB has been focusing on. Also, our own Scripps News investigation had found last year that this is something that happens to bridges all over the country. We found 650 bridge strikes since 2019. hundreds of them, almost one every single day. So the NTSB saying that not only should this bridge have been outfitted with better protection systems, but that other bridges across the country need the same thing. In her opening remarks, the chairwoman of the NTSB saying that this is an accident that should not have happened, that not only should this ship have had better systems to basically make sure it could stay on course during an electrical failure, but that this bridge should have had better systems to withstand a collision. There were something called dolphins, two dolphins that are essentially concrete and timber protection systems on both sides of the bridge, but it turns out that the Dali was able to essentially snake around those dolphins and hitting the pier. And once that pier was hit, the entire bridge came down on top of it. So we're going to continue to monitor this hearing and to see exactly what comes out of it in terms of recommendations for other bridges all over the country. One thing that I'm expecting to hear, because we've heard the NTSB talking about it a lot, is warning systems at these 68 bridges that they are worried about. Essentially, technology that if a ship hits something like the Golden Gate Bridge or Brooklyn Bridge or any of these bridges that the NTSB is worried about, that there would be flashing lights that would tell drivers to stop going, that the disaster was imminent. One thing the NTSB noted with this particular bridge collapse in Baltimore, had it not been that police were notified right away that this Dali ship was running off course, there could have been cars transiting on the bridge, and that was not the case. So countless lives, according to the NTSB, saved in this case. 6 construction workers died. We're now learning, had they been notified at the same time as the transit authority, that their lives also could have been saved. Holly.
Oh, wow, it's so tragic to hear. Let's talk about these safety improvements that the NTSB is calling for. I mean, obviously, it's going to cost a lot of money to do something like this. So what are the chances cities and states will add these kind of safety improvements?
Well, the NTSB says that they have reached out to these cities and states over the past 18 months, and they've said, we're concerned that you are not up to standards when it comes to bridge protection systems. And they say that these states and cities have been receptive. So we know that a lot of these places are actually adding new buffers and are making plans to do so. I'll point out the Bay Bridge in this area, which is right by the Key Bridge. There is work underway to do that right now. But of course, we're talking about huge bridges in a lot of cases and billions of dollars it would take to really outfit them and to make sure that they get up to standards. That is money that they are going to need from the federal government in a lot of cases. It's not clear if that funding is there, which is why the NTSB says that at least a warning system would go a long way, especially, Holly, as these ships get bigger and bigger. The fact is, a lot of these bridges simply were not designed to handle these massive cargo ships that are now transiting from these city ports out into the ocean. It's something that has been an issue and will continue to be one as these ships only continue to grow in size. Holly.
Something we haven't thought of. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra live for us. Thank you for that information. And now let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. A South Carolina bill that could sentence women who get abortions to up to 30 years in prison goes before a Senate subcommittee today. The proposal would ban all abortions except when the woman's life is threatened and could restrict IUDs and in vitro fertilization. It would also make providing information about abortions illegal. The bill goes further than any other abortion proposal since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. Even some anti-abortion groups oppose the measure, with South Carolina Citizens for Life saying women who get abortions are victims too and should not be punished. Today, a federal bankruptcy judge approved OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma's plan to settle thousands of opioid lawsuits. This deal requires Sackler family members who own the company to pay up to $7 billion over 15 years. Most of the money will go to government entities to fight the opioid crisis that has killed 900,000 Americans since 1999. About $850 million will go to individual victims, with payments of around $8,000 to $16,000 each. The Sackler family will give up ownership of Purdue and be barred from selling opioids worldwide. Straight ahead on Today as It Happened.
As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
Mr. President, is it appropriate, Mr. President, for your family to be doing business in Saudi Arabia while you're president? Is that a conflict of interest? And Your Royal Highness, the U.S. intelligence concluded that you orchestrated the brutal murder of a journalist. 9/11 families are furious that you are here in the Oval Office. Why should Americans trust you? And the same to you, Mr. President.
Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the
But the
worst.
question is
One of the
legitimate,
worst
sir.
in the business. But I'll answer your question.
Thank you.
I have nothing to do with the family business. I have left, and when I've devoted 100% of my energy. What my family does is fine. They do business all over. They've done very little with Saudi Arabia, actually. I'm sure they could do a lot. And anything they've done has been very good. That's what we've done. We've built a tremendous business for a long time. I've been very successful. I decided to leave that success behind and make America very successful. And I've made America more successful by far than it ever was, and that it ever could have been, no matter who was president. There would be nobody bringing in $21 trillion, that I can tell you right now. As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with MBS Mohammed bin Salman. It is the Crown Prince's first visit to Washington since the brutal murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Several topics discussed, including that murder, with a harsh pushback from the president. The president describing Khashoggi is, in his words, somewhat rogue. Also, several major business developments discussed, from fighter jets to AI to the possibility of Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is live right now on the North Lawn at the White House. And Haley, the president and the Crown Prince, a visit that can best be described as ceremonial and controversial. What did you hear?
Yeah, Del, the two leaders really touting the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, particularly in President Trump's second term in office. This is a significant visit, one that is rolling out the pomp and circumstance that we typically see with a state visit for the Crown Prince, particularly the leaders focusing on the investments across defense and technology sectors. A senior administration official telling us that will include a multi-billion-dollar investment in artificial intelligence infrastructure, cooperation on civil nuclear energy, defense sales, and advancing the Saudis' pledge to commit $600 billion in investments in the United States. In the Oval Office, notably, the Crown Prince upping that to $1 trillion, noting the pathway through the agreement. Additionally, officials there in the Oval Office say that they are working on the export license for advanced chips to Saudi Arabia, while President Trump doubled down on his intent to sell them F-35s, marking a significant update in the defense agreement between the countries, as historically the concern has been over potential Chinese access to sensitive technologies through the F-35s. The president maintaining, though, that Israel is aware and suggesting he believes they would be happy about it. Now, the visit includes the bilateral meeting we are seeing play out following the arrival ceremony earlier today, as well as a dinner this evening, including, we understand, CEOs from defense and technology companies. But for the Crown Prince, this also marks his first return to the White House since 2018 and following the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. This was brought up in that spray in the Oval Office between the reporters and the leaders, and President Trump suggesting that, quote, a lot of people didn't like that gentleman and that, quote, things happen, suggesting that the Crown Prince knew nothing about it, criticizing the reporter asking the question over it. Now, while the Crown Prince has denied involvement, the U.S. intelligence community concluded after the murder that the Crown Prince likely ordered the operation that led to his death. This was a significant comment, but notably the Crown Prince also weighing in, saying that it was, quote, painful to hear about the journalists, suggesting that they have completed steps of investigation and to improve their system. Certainly, though, Del, this is a significant visit as the president is looking to deepen those economic, those defense ties, but also for his broader plans for peace in the Middle East that he has long sought.
Before I let you go, before we go to break, the Abraham Accords factoring into this visit as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, no secret that President Trump has made clear he wants to expand the Abraham Accords. He wants Saudi Arabia to be part of that and sees them as a key piece of that expansion. The president saying that they had already discussed it, saying he got a positive response from the Crown Prince. Now, the Crown Prince was not committal to joining it. He said he wants to be a part of it, however, pointed to the need for a two-state solution when it comes to Gaza and Palestine. The president indicating, though, that they had a good talk, suggesting that things were moving in the right direction. Of course, under the prior administration, it was believed that the Saudis were close to normalizing relations with Israel, and that was one of the impetuses potentially for Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. Of course, this is significant, Del, because it comes as the administration is looking to maintain and push forward President Trump's 20-point peace plan in Gaza that calls for next an international stabilization force, a board of peace, disarming of Hamas, as well as reconstruction. Now, the Crown Prince didn't commit a specific number, but reiterated that Saudi Arabia does plan to help in the construction, didn't offering any further details publicly on that front, though, Del.
The president also pushing back on the release of the Epstein files, calling it once again a Democratic hoax. We should point out the news conference on Capitol Hill today with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein saying, please, Mr. President, I voted for you. Do not call it a hoax.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
It's some kind of curse to have so much invisible damage. It's harder for me than being on the battlefield.
And later,
I want to speak goodness and love and hope into the women standing behind me and all of the other survivors.
In a federal court blocking Texas from using those newly drawn congressional maps, the three-judge panel finding state lawmakers likely engaged in unconstitutional racial gerrymandering. The court ordering the state now to go back to its 2021 map. The ruling is significant since Texas triggered both parties to follow suit with other state maps, California being notably among them. Republican Governor Greg Abbott and President Donald Trump touting those new maps as a way for Republicans to flip democratically held seats in the state. Today's ruling will likely be appealed. Medicare recipients will pay more for their coverage next year. The monthly premium for Medicare Part B will jump $202.90. That's up about $18 from this year. The annual deductible will also rise to $283. Hospital stays will cost you more as well. The Part A deductible for hospital admissions is up about $60 more next year. Those changes taking effect on January 1st. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum pushing back against President Trump's suggestion of U.S. military strikes against cartels in her country, saying, quote, it is not going to happen, and that Mexico does not accept foreign government intervention. Trump saying Monday he'd be willing to do whatever it takes to stop drugs from entering the United States, including strikes inside Mexico. Sheinbaum saying Mexico is willing to collaborate, but will operate in its own territory.
It's just expression of my emotion. I can show what I feel. It's always red and black.
Нормально, ты живой, блядь.
It's blood and this is the ground. And when it mixed together, this is what infantry soldiers see day by day and night by night.
You're painting the abyss.
It scares me a lot to become this darkness after war.
We will fight for our land till the last breath.
Roman once painted the war with words.
So this is how we fight?
In raw, unflinching GoPro dispatches from the front lines of Ukraine.
We know what we are fighting for.
Bright and bold, free-flowing over X.
We're taking it back.
TikTok, Instagram. The young sharpshooter filming his own war captured the world's attention and mine.
I don't know which video can be last. Baby, my sniper rifle. So we continue fighting for freedom.
For more than 3 years, I've been following him as he chronicled the battles and the rare, quiet moments in between.
Я б з ними ще погрався, але зараз по нам буде ворожа арта працювати.
Back then, Roman spoke with the certainty of a young soldier who hadn't yet met his limits.
I felt really like I'm invincible. I'm like some superhero.
The fight's so hot.
Most of the time, 99% of the time, I'm not afraid to die.
What about that 1%?
I'm a human being.
It's very dangerous here, guys.
But as the war staggered into its second year, each blast took its toll. 5 battlefield concussions don't just add up, they compound.
It's some kind of curse to have so much invisible damage. It's harder for me than being on the battlefield.
Roman's story in a conflict marked by an estimated 400,000 Ukrainian military wounded, a reminder that for those who fight, the war's costs are paid long after the battle ends.
This is Today as It Happened. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Today as It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. So let's pick up where we left off.
On this vote, the yeas are 427, the nays are 1. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
That breaking news happening just moments ago. The House voting to release the Epstein files, 427-1. It comes after months of back and forth between Democrats and Republicans to push the Justice Department to release all of the files of convicted sex offender and financier Jeffrey Epstein. We have team coverage for you of everything unfolding during this hour. Our national correspondent Alex Miller has our reaction from the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. Our White House correspondent Haley Bull is live on the North Lawn. Our political director Andrew Rafferty has our political analysis. But we're going to begin with our congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, who is covering that vote that happened just moments ago. Nate, one lone nay vote. Who was it?
Congressman Clay Higgins, the Republican from Louisiana, he explained his vote in a statement posted to X, saying that he did so because of the implications of possibly releasing the names of people who are not necessarily implicated in the files, victims, survivors, other people who might not want their names out in the public. He says that if they make certain changes to this bill, provide more identity protections in the Senate, he might be compelled to vote for it in the House of Representatives. And look, the question of changing this bill, that is an open one, whether the Senate could make major changes to this legislation, something that I think a lot of the Republican backers, that handful who've been pushing for this vote to happen since the month of August or before the month of August, they're really concerned that changes could be made in the Senate before this gets to President Trump's desk that could water down the intent of trying to get all of these files out into the open. I caught up with Congresswoman Nancy Mace, one of the principal backers of this bill, who's been vocally in support of releasing all of these files just moments before the vote began. Take a listen. What does it mean for this bill to finally get a vote on the House floor?
This is about justice, but also it's bigger than that. This is about hope for women everywhere, that one day maybe all of us who are survivors will finally get justice. So it's bittersweet, and it's been a very emotional day for me. I met with some of the Epstein victims this morning, and we bonded over our trauma. Actually very healthy for me too, and just seeing them and how encouraged they feel. And now the demand will be in the Senate. No delays.
Are you concerned the Senate could make amendments to this? Speaker Johnson was quite open, saying he's asked the majority leader to make changes.
I pray that they don't. The Epstein survivors want this to move forward. They do not want any delays, so there should be no delays in the Senate. Let's get this done. The president said he would sign it when it gets to his desk, so we should demand no delays. They've waited long enough.
Again, there are no guarantees. The Senate could make changes to this thing. That is part of the regular deliberative process. And while Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he could force a vote on trying to get these files released as soon as later this afternoon, again, there's no guarantee that there won't be an attempt here in the U.S. Senate to make changes to this bill. Speaker Johnson openly lobbying for the Senate Majority Leader to make changes before this bill gets to President Trump's desk. Trump has said he will sign it. Again, there are the open questions of whether the DOJ will actually release everything or claim that certain files or names, identities, portions of the Epstein documents are under active investigation and therefore cannot be released.
Thomas Massie, though, saying that there are thousands of victims out there. Difficult to imagine that all of those victims' files would be withheld. Our congressional correspondent, Nathaniel Reed, on Capitol Hill for us. Also on Capitol Hill right now, Alex Miller, our national correspondent. Alex, you've spent years talking to survivors of Epstein's crimes. I understand you've been texting to them throughout the vote. What are they saying?
Well, they were on the Hill watching this vote together. They wanted to be together to experience this moment. Remember, this was just a handful of survivors. We heard from about 12. There were a few this morning that did not speak, but, you know, just a very small sliver were on Capitol Hill this morning. When you think about potentially how many survivors there are out there, they think there could be upwards of 1,000 young girls, now women, who were abused by Jeffrey Epstein or trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein to other men. So it is an incredibly momentous occasion for them to be here. Some of them have been fighting for decades to be here. Maria Farmer, not well enough to be here. Her sister Annie Farmer, also a survivor in her place, has been making the rounds, talking about her experience and her sister's experience, and the fact that they went to the FBI in 1996. They went through 5 presidential administrations trying to get files released, trying to make reports, all of it which they came up short. They were not able to get any attention from any of these administrations. And so when you hear stories like that, that was discussed this morning, even though they tried to not make this political, they talked about the fact that this is a Democratic and a Republican issue. And when I've spoken to survivors myself, they do not want to talk about any specifically directed questions about what one party or another has to do with this issue. They really tried to stay above the fray. Today was different. There was a lot of frustration today, particularly directed at the president for calling this a hoax, for trying to push the hand, force the hand of particularly the women that signed on to this petition, the Republican women like Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and particularly having a lot of support for Congresswoman Greene for all that she has endured in the recent days, for staying on this petition and voicing her support with these survivors. They have really, shown frustration because many of them supported President Trump during this recent election because he said he was going to release the files. Listen to what they had to say.
This is not an issue of a few corrupt Democrats or a few corrupt Republicans. This is a case of institutional betrayal.
I beg you, President Trump, please stop making this political. It is not about you, President Trump. You are our president. Please start acting like it. Show some class. Show some real leadership. Show that you actually care about the people other than yourself. I voted for you, but your behavior on this issue has been a national embarrassment.
And Del, while those women were speaking, particularly Jenna Lisa, who you just heard from, Congresswoman Greene was nodding in the background. She was consoling other survivors, but agreeing with a lot of the criticism that they had for the president and their defenses of her. Look, they are not, oblivious to the fact that this is going to still be a difficult road for them to get this across the finish line, at least when it comes to Congress. They were very clear that they believe that the president can release the files now without all of this hoopla here on Capitol Hill, and they want him to do so, but they are, here for the foreseeable future trying to get this issue across the finish line.
And the victim saying over and over again, Mr. President, this is not a hoax. Haley Bull, the president running on releasing the files. Once in office, though, it was back to nothing to see here, folks. Now that the vote on the release of the files has been completed, 427-1, unanimous almost. Has there been any reaction so far from the White House where you are?
Dal, not at this point. The president currently meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia this afternoon, but earlier today, he maintained when pressed by reporters that he had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein and doubled down on what we have so frequently heard from the White House in recent months of their view that this is what they call a Democratic hoax. Now, we have seen the evolution of how Trump has approached the Epstein files over the course of this second term in office. Over the summer, to walk it back here, we saw the Justice Department release a memo stating that no incriminating list was uncovered. But some members, particularly some of President Trump's most ardent supporters in the MAGA base, continued to call for more steps. And President Trump, at a certain point, appeared to seek to change the conversation when he started accusing Democrats of what he called a hoax. And more recently has been clear that he feels that Democrats are trying to maintain a distraction, going so far as to warn Republicans against joining that effort. But still, when it comes to the vote we saw today at the Capitol, Del, the Republicans were still pushing this forward despite that. And over the weekend, we saw President Trump then throw his support behind voting a supportive vote to release those files. But a White House official maintained to us that they feel the president's position hasn't changed. They say he has always been committed to transparency and are doubling down on their pivot to criticize Democrats in this. And I say a pivot, it is one that we have seen go on going back early on in this second term in the administration. But this is what the president said when he was asked about Epstein earlier today ahead of the vote.
As far as the Epstein files I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. And I guess I turned out to be right. But you know who does have? Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, who ran Harvard, was with him every single night, every single weekend. They lived together. They went to his island many times. I never did. Andrew Weissman, I hear. All these guys were friends of his. You don't even talk about those people. You just keep going on the Epstein files. And what the Epstein is a Democrat hoax to try and get me not to be able to talk about the $21 trillion that I talked about today. It's a hoax.
The president clear he wants to focus on some other issues, as he said over the weekend.
All right, House correspondent Haley Beauforce live on the North Lawn. Let's go to our political director, Andrew Rafferty, right now and wrap the 30,000-foot view. The president has a habit whenever there is a controversy of saying, I did not know that person. There is a clear record now that the president in this case knew Jeffrey Epstein. Talk to me, if you will, about the political peril of criminal versus moral.
Well, look, it's criminal, moral, political. I do think it is worth noting that the president could release these all on his own if he wanted to. We didn't need to see a discharge petition in the House and now these amended things in the Senate, and he's gotten that question, including today, and doesn't really give a full answer other than the fact that he's released tens of thousands of documents, which they have given to House investigators, but certainly not the level of public scrutiny that you saw members ultimately vote for today. This has been really interesting, especially as it being this big first sticking point of the second term in office, Del, because it is the most sort of visible fracture of the Republican base. And we've overstated some other times in his political life where Republicans have broken with him, and we've said that maybe this is a turning point. But I think the difference, January 6th is probably the most relevant and glaring example. I think the difference here is what Alex Miller has been covering, and that is the survivors, the voices, the importance of this issue, and the human impact of this issue. This is not just a conspiracy. This goes much deeper than that. There is long-lasting impacts on humans who are on Capitol Hill today, and it's certainly fair that this is not a Donald Trump exclusive issue. There are Democrats who most certainly are going to be named in these files, but the fact that there has not been this level of transparency until today, I think is telling, and I think the political will is no doubt there.
I want to go back to Capitol Hill right now. Our congressional correspondent, Nathaniel Reed. Nate, I understand you have a survivor reacting to the vote 427-1 to release the Epstein files. What did she say?
I just spoke with her a couple moments ago, and she told me that, certainly she's encouraged by this result in the House of Representatives. I think that this sent an enormous signal today. In some ways, this, was a campaign promise for President Trump, and we've alluded to that so far. But notably, she told me that, that there are some concerns. They hope the Senate does the right thing, so to speak. And to be clear, this is something that's totally captivated the public's attention. You don't typically see this with votes here in the U.S. Congress. But look, you can just see the sheer number of signed supporters. Right now, it's only credentialed members of the press and congressional staff and members who are allowed here on the plaza. But you can just see members of the public there. Justice for Epstein survivors, a sign there. Another one saying just release all the Epstein files now. Again, a number of people even gathering to just watch this spectacle unfold. And look, this is something that has had a lot of attention. There was a big question of how long this would take to happen, whether this ever could actually happen. And certainly today we watched it happen. Now, of course, there's the question of what the Senate does. So, whatever victory this is for the victims, in some ways, this, is just half of the battle. There's a real question of whether the Senate makes major changes here, if they approve this, if they send it to Trump's desk, or whether the DOJ is willing to just approve this thing, release all of the documents, or whether they claim that there are current active investigations which are preventing them from disclosing some of those documents. I just also caught up briefly with the family of Virginia Giuffre, who thanked us for covering this, ultimately not directly commenting on their reaction to this vote passing in the House of Representatives.
We went into the day saying that history would be made on Capitol Hill. History was indeed made. The vote 427-1. This is a saga that began back in 1991. The victims showing those photographs of themselves when they were young, some of them 14 years of age, saying that their childhood, their youth was robbed from them. There are two dramas now unfolding as this story moves forward. What happens to the victims now? Will they see justice after something that began so long ago? Will politicians decide that this is a criminal or moral issue? Will the president sign it into law? So much, basically, to decide what happens next. I want to thank all of you for your coverage as we watch this unfold. A reminder, these were, in some words, little girls who lost their childhood, now hoping to see justice in the United States of America and hoping that that is indeed the case. Stay with us. You're watching Scripps News.
We'll be right back to continue our rundown of today's top stories on Today as It Happened. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
A new survey out shows just about all of you are concerned about the cost of living, but opinions seem to differ depending on where you live. The new poll from the American Communities Product finding that people in rural America are more optimistic about the country's future. Big city residents are less worried about crime than they were a couple years ago, even though President Trump claims that crime is out of control. Optimism about the future of the nation is also down from last year in areas with large Hispanic communities. In Virginia, the man convicted of killing 3 University of Virginia football players will soon learn his fate. He will be sentenced after the judge in the case hears from all of the witnesses. Cameron Thompson from our Scripps News Group was inside the courtroom.
It was an emotional first day of testimony as the two sides tried to make their case to the judge as to how much time Christopher Darnell Jones Jr. should spend in prison. Starting with the opening statements from the prosecution, they said that Jones's actions that night were calculated and spread terror to not only the victims but the entire UVA community, and justice requires a life sentence. The defense hasn't said a specific length but said there needs to be a mixture of accountability with compassion. They say while the killings were senseless, they need to be understood in the context of Jones's life, adding he had an abusive childhood and was kind and caring but descended into mental illness the summer before the shooting. The witnesses who took to the stand for the prosecution on day one included first responders involved in the investigation, along with victims from that night who described not only the trauma on the bus but in the time since. This includes Michael Hollins, another UVA football player who was shot but survived and was best friends with Sean Perry. The day finished with testimony from the mom of Devin Chandler, one of the 3 men killed. She said that when his life was ended, her family was changed forever, and this has caused a painful wound that will never heal. For the times I looked up at Jones during all of the testimony, he appeared to be giving no reaction to what was being said. Sentencing is set to go all the way until Friday.
You're watching Today as It Happened. We'll be back in just a moment.
We're following breaking news from Capitol Hill once again. Earlier today, it was the House that voted to release the Epstein files by a vote of 427 to 1. Now I understand it is the Senate that has voted in the same manner. Let's go straight to our congressional correspondent, Nathaniel Reed. Nate, explain exactly how it happened.
An even stronger vote, Del. This was the work of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who just took to the Senate floor, asked unanimous consent, the unanimous agreement of all 100 senators to pass the Epstein files bill, send it directly to President Trump's desk for a signature, and no one objected. That means the bill has effectively passed. At some point, as soon as tonight, possibly in the next few days, President Trump will get that bill from the Congress. He will then have the question of whether he wants to sign it, whether he wants to compel the Department of Justice to release all of the Epstein files. This just coming in just the last couple of minutes. The Senate Minority Leader taking the Senate floor late this afternoon to request, again, unanimous consent, the unanimous agreement of all 100 senators to cut through the red tape, cut through the congressional procedure, and just pass the Epstein files bill. In the last couple of moments, he succeeded at doing just that. So the bill has effectively, as we understand, passed through the U.S. Senate. It now goes to President Trump's desk for a signature.
Nate, this clears all that red tape that House Speaker Mike Johnson was talking about earlier today, in which he said there were flaws in the House bill. Apparently, the Senate did not agree.
Right. Well, what's interesting here is that ultimately the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, decided not to make the changes that House Speaker Mike Johnson had requested. And, Del, I'm glad you brought that up, because there was an attempt here to try and make changes to this bill, to make changes to this Epstein files bill. The House Speaker making very clear with reporters earlier today that he was not at all happy with his members for forcing this vote. Ultimately, this was a long-fought vote in the House of Representatives. You might remember the House of Representatives did not meet for a very long time for the entirety of the month of October, partially due to the fact that there was concerns that a vote on the Epstein files bill could be forced if the Speaker swore in Representative Adelita Grijalva, the Democrat from Arizona, who had promised to be the 218th vote on that petition to force the vote that we saw happen earlier today. Ultimately, the House of Representatives returned last week. The Congresswoman sworn into office signed that bill. Now it appears that the Senate has passed unanimously that bill to release the Epstein files. Again, a lot of questions about where things go from here.
I'm Holly Furfer. Have an excellent Tuesday night.